Good morning. It must be Tuesday because you're here with us on the Kitchings Table. Welcome. I'm W. Earl Kitchings, your host. As always, joining me every Tuesday, my co-host Ronleen Kennedy. Good morning, Ronleen.
Good morning, Earl. How are you doing this morning?
Well, it's another great day, and there's always something new here at the Kitchings Table that hopefully, when we share it, is something that makes everybody go, and
Yeah.
thought about that, didn't know that. And as I've shared with you on many occasions, sometimes what we are looking to share with our audience, it doesn't always come right after this show. Sometimes it comes just before this show, and that's just how it happens sometimes. Information it moves so fast and it's so much. I mean, when you think about how much information circulates in a matter of 24 hours, it's just unbelievable. And when we go back to talking about encyclopedias, encyclopedias could never keep up with the speed of the internet and how much information is passed along, how much it changes, how much it comes and goes. Hour by hour, minute by minute, things happen and change and just infiltrate our lives with so much information. So I think when the creation of the World Wide Web, the internet was created, the fact that all this information would be like a tsunami almost, if you want to look at it that way, because of how much information just comes down to us. So we're happy to be with you this morning here on the Kitchings Table. We're glad you're joining us. And hey, if you like what we're doing, tell a friend to tune in to us because we're always happy to have new faces in the place. Our topic today, Ronleen, racism in the air and water.
Go ahead, Earl. There's so much to be said about that.
You gotta love Ronleen, that infectious smile and laugh. I only said racism in the air and water, and she just started cracking up right away. So it must be a good topic and some good tidbits that we're going to be sharing today. If she's laughing like that already, we hadn't even got out of the starting blocks yet, and she's already lit up. But
Yeah.
racism in the air and water, and I want to start off by citing this quote or this outtake from something I saw on Wikipedia. And hopefully it gives you some idea where we're going with this. If not, just hang on because we're going to get there. Relocating toxic waste. Relocating toxic waste is justified since poor communities are not able to pay as much as a wealthier area for a clean environment. Relocating toxic waste. And we don't think about it, but it happens every day. We can see it passing us by in either what we call tanker trucks with those long cylindrical trucks that we see that look like tubes, aluminum tubes moving about our highways, in our roads, or those black cylindrical train cars that look like larger tubes that are on our railroad tracks. And when you hear about an accident of a train getting off track and it explodes and all this toxicity is spread, either chemicals that have yet to be used in some other way to make a product or toxic chemicals are being moved to a location to keep them, I guess, safe or to protect the environment or to protect. They certainly are protecting the communities that they're being located in. But when these toxic wastes are relocated and moved, oftentimes they have been moved or take a path through poor communities. And Ronline, I've known since I was very young. I made this observation. Have you ever noticed how train tracks run throughout the country sometimes? There's
Yes.
sometimes, they go through a lot of communities, but they definitely gonna go through poor communities. They go through a lot of communities, but they're definitely gonna go through poor communities. And I've thought about that in two ways. One, I've always thought that if there was ever a way to gain martial law in a very, I don't know, very detrimental way, they could move military on these train tracks and put them in the hearts of our communities in the blink of an eye.
Yes.
They can put the troops in the trains, they can put the equipment in the trains, unload them, and you know, and I know somebody might say they wouldn't. They wouldn't do something. Yeah, yeah, okay. And then the other thing is um, knowing that toxic things are being moved about. So when we talk about racism in the air and the water, that's going to be the backside of the show. But when we talk about environmental pollution, environmental pollution, and I had to make sure that I was on point with this when I went and looked it up. And environmental pollution is considered the introduction of harmful materials into the environment. And these harmful materials are called pollutants. And pollutants can be natural. They cite volcanic ash. Well, we don't have to worry about that on this side of the United States. Uh, they can also be created by human activity, trash or runoff produced by factories and plants. And these pollutants damage the quality of air, water, and land. Air, water, and land. And the air is what we breathe, the water is what we drink, and the land is where we live. And there have been places where I know here in our community, the land has been indoctrinated with toxic waste, landfills with uh, ash when they used to burn garbage, and that burning produced ash, and they would bury the ash in the ground. Well, guess where they took that ash? To the poor communities. Then, after time, and I'm just citing one instance, after time, after this settled, after they put some dirt over it, they built schools on top of these toxic places. The water, we all we have to say is, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and how they handled that water situation up there, and then the air, factories, plants that have things that when they're manufacturing chemicals, the manufacturing of chemicals require that fire be used in order to make these chemicals or some type of heat. And heat gives off smoke. Smoke gives off fumes. Fumes give off smells. Smells fill the air. Once upon a time here in Jacksonville, I know I had friends that was like, they didn't want to come to Jacksonville to visit because they said it smells so bad. Well, it didn't smell bad over the whole city of Jacksonville. I'll tell you that. It didn't smell bad over the whole city, but I guarantee you this: on the north side of town, it had a smell. And north side was just north of downtown. South and west, not so much. So they cleaned it up to a degree, but again, in other communities, it has been those three things. So there are 7 things that create environmental pollution: particle pollution, common air pollution, pollutants, greenhouse gases, the volatile organic compounds, ammonia. Now, ammonia sits out there by itself. It doesn't have anything else associated with it other than ammonia. And I found out that, Ron Lee, maybe you know this, and maybe you don't, and maybe our listeners know this, that when there is a large buildup of ammonia in our human body, That means when our liver is not functioning well, when there's an extreme buildup, if there's too much ammonia gas in our body will start to shut down.
Yes.
So the next time you are using ammonia, I want you to think about that strong smell that comes from that bottle and just imagine if that gas, that smell is a gas and it's in your body. And you have organs in your body that regulate a lot of things. And your liver is one that regulates this. But when it doesn't and it can't regulate that particular gas like it's supposed to in your body, you get a buildup, it becomes toxic in your body, and your body will start to shut down. And I'm not speaking about something I'm read. I'm speaking about firsthand knowledge because I had a friend who was on the brink. His body had basically uh, had too much toxicity in it, and ammonia was at the cause of it, and he was very much on the brink. Fortunately, uh, I guess his number, as we say, it was not his time yet, and he was given new life, and thank God for that. So ammonia is very, very toxic, and it's not just in the bottle of ammonia that you see or you purchase out of a store, but it becomes a gas inside our bodies. Then there are bad odors and natural sources of pollution. And Ronline has already asked me, well, Earl, what's this pollution called crackers?
I did.
And for those of you who understand the term crackers in its negative form, is not that. It's the pollution created from firecrackers and fireworks. I know we don't think about it. Excuse me. I know we don't think about it in that perspective, but when we light it up, when it's lit up and set off again, it takes heat oftentimes to set off these chemicals. And when heat is put to these chemicals, it gives off a smell, and the smell goes into the air. I mean, so it's a domino effect. So crackers, and when we talk about natural sources of pollution, there are four of those: dust. We all can relate to dust. Natural gas. We know what natural gas is. LP, petroleum, liquid petroleum gas. Fireworks, and last but not least, smoking. And smoking and crackers require heat. You cannot get smoke from a cigarette until you put a match to it. You cannot get a spark from a firecracker or fireworks till you put a match or heat to it or some type of ignition uh, to set it off. So those are the things that are the seven pollutants that we have to be mindful of, and in breaking them down, air pollution from factories, from our cars and trucks, from the aerosols we use in for different things, and that's why you've seen probably a minimization of aerosol cans. Once upon a time, aerosol cans, man, that was the best way to spray something around, and spray deodorant, spray hair chemicals for your hair. I mean, and imagine back when everybody was spraying their hair with some kind of chemical to make the hair look good, get that afro right, get that afro sheen in the can and spray it up. So you got those things, and of course, carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide are deadly, and these air pollutants are everywhere. We breathe them in every day. We just probably don't think about them. Then there's particle pollution, outdoor fires, cars and trucks, um, wood stoves and fireplaces. All these things give off a pollutant. And like I said, a match, which is made with sulfur, When you strike that match, you'll see smoke come off it. You put it to another object, like a piece of wood, it causes the wood to burn and smoke comes off it. So that is an air pollutant. And then we have our common air pollutants: sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, ground level ozone, carbon monoxide. It's funny how oxide is in those three things. Volatile organic compounds. These are things that are in the air, and they're considered to be some of the most harmful gases there are. When you see volcanoes erupting and all that smoke that comes up out of them and all the ash that falls back to the ground from that, these are things that can harm our environments, our plant, our water, ourselves, our animals. And as we talk about the next one on the list, greenhouse gases, we have to be mindful that we are only going to get one Mother Earth, only one. There's not another one in our entire solar system. There's not another planet out there like Earth. And for those of you who have this burn to go to Mars, be my guest. Just remember, it's a 7-month one-way trip, and there are no AAA stations out there to help you out if you have a problem. Okay? But the greenhouse gas effects, again, are causing the planet to warm up and heat up. So these pollutants, and we don't think about it, but because there are so many opportunities now where people are launching rockets to go to outer space, I want you to think about the atmosphere of the Earth being like this, like a window. And think about all the dust and dirt and smoke and everything being outside your house window. And every time you open it, some of that comes in. So every time they launch a rocket and it penetrates that atmosphere, they have to open that window for that rocket to get out. And once they open it, because they have to line it up where it opens so they can get the rocket out. So that takes some time. So even if it's just a minute, imagine having your house window open for a minute and it was just smoke outside your window and you let it stay open for a minute. How much smoke would come into your house and what kind of smell would that give your house? So when they're launching these rockets, and yeah, we're talking about the effect of modernizing and making things better, the quality of human life. Yeah, there's some effects, but the overall effect is that the monoxide, dioxide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, whatever. Not only from the rocket ship burning off all this fuel to get up and out, but what's outside comes in. And then when they get ready to come back in, they open that window again and it comes back in. So we're warming up the planet. I don't think Mother Nature was meant to have, rockets going in and out at the rate they're going now, but they do a lot of shooting things into space. And most of it is about economics. So that's the greenhouse gases that are warming up the earth: methane gas, carbon monoxide, all these things, volatile organic chemicals or compounds, hydrocarbons, VOCs, volatile organic compounds is what VOC stands for. Again, affecting greenhouse gases. Again, I've already spoken about ammonia. Ammonia is used as a nitrogen to help plants grow, but it also can kill plants. Bad odors, whenever you smell them, you almost need a mask. And then when we get to number 7, when we talk about dust, natural gas, crackers, and smoking, all these things combined, Ronleen, create pollution, environmental pollution. And it attacks the water, the air, and the land. And when you see animals out here dying from oil spills because a tanker has broken open, when they say, well, that tanker has 100 million gallons of oil on it, it has not been turned into some other type of chemical or gasoline, and it just lands in the ocean. The environment of the ocean takes a hit. When you see countries collecting all the waste that is out there in the ocean, plastic bottles, plastic bags, straws, and things like that, once again, environmental pollution. The animals in the ocean suffer. And when we talk about the fact that food comes from the ocean, but do you want to eat toxic sea life, fish, oysters, scallops, clams? You might want to rethink that. So, man, once again, is the root to all of these issues. Although man creates some good stuff, it comes with a price. And as we deal with what it comes with, and I'm looking at a picture here online of a oil platform that is out there in the ocean, and you may not, we may not be aware of just how many oil platforms are out there in the ocean drilling for oil and pulling it up out of the earth. There are a lot of them, and now they're putting these uh, big wind fans, turbine fans out in the ocean to create uh, more power, a little bit safer than getting it out of the ground. But you got to take ships to go out there and build platforms in order to make all these things happen. So it's a catch 22 because you got to do one thing in order to do something else. You got to pollute in order to get to safety and vice versa. So I'm gonna stop right there and let you weigh in on some of the things that we're talking about this morning because this this environmental pollution is one thing, but man, when I get to the backside of this, Ronleen, light some folks up.
So true. That's the part I'm waiting for, Earl. So thank you so much for bringing this to light. And this is why we have these shows so that it can cause you to think and think about your environment. So I was one of my friends asked me to watch the series, the seasons of Suits. And in one of those seasons, it was about the lady who was trying to save her organization as well as what she was trying to do about like the environment kind of thing or whatever. Well, anyway, one of the men brought to another person's attention who could have access to all of the data and things like that. And he was like, if you want to do something for someone, you claim you want to help people or whatever, he was like, here are 4 housing developments that are being affected by the water. And so when you think about what goes into our drinking water every day, I've had the privilege to go to one of our water plants here in the city to see how our water is being take how it transitions from being non-drinking water to drinking water,
Yeah, the treatment. Yeah,
the treatment. And when I saw the many processes that it had to go through, it was like, wow. And it was not clean. That was not a clean slate of a process to just look at. And then you're thinking about it, it's like, okay, well, you have to have water. And we just did a segment not too long ago when that research led to there's only 2% or less in the whole entire world of fresh water.
two
And so
percent.
2%, yes. So with that 2% of water to deal with all of the people and the animals that depend on that water, Our agriculture depend on fresh water, and we only get 2%. That's a lot of life that depends on that 2% of water, and we don't get any more. And when I say 2% or less, it's because we're dealing with the evaporation of water. We're dealing with, wherever water is lost. So when you're thinking about it on that magnitude, and you're thinking about your plant life, like you said, the life on land, when you're thinking about your animal life, the animals that you depend on for your food source, the animals that you depend on to, whatever that plays into that manufacturing process. And people have to be fed every day, you know regardless of if you're a plant-based eater or carnivore eater, it still depends on fresh water. And for your body to function, you talked about ammonia, just ammonia being in your body alone. So without the water to help dilute, to help clean your organs, to help dilute all of those processes that your body is infiltrated with through pollution, now you can see the importance of why we need to keep our environment clean. So, Earl, I thank you for bringing this to our attention. I hope more people think about it. This is why we need to start grooming our children into the areas of science. Um, get them get them past of you think of, well, studying science is boring. Studying science can save your life. So when you think about it on in that regard, Earl, just tell me what comes to mind when you think about that to be able to help our people.
Well, you make a very good point when you say science is a necessity. Science has to do with so many different things, and science will create so many different things that, and it creates jobs, it creates a need. I mean, science, is something that we must have. I mean, and science has to be utilized in order for us to, I guess, fix some things or control some things or whatever. So when our children aren't totally and fully prepared and given a reason and understanding about what science does, and when I think about the fact that there are young people who are chemical engineers, and you might wonder, well, what does a chemical engineer do? Well, that's a very deep subject to earn a degree in and to study chemical engineering. It has to do with uh, chemicals and how they play a part in, so many different things. So aside from the science part, that we need to make sure that we introduce to our children the proper way to engage them to want to learn about science, comes that other piece that seems to strike fear in the hearts of our children. Like public speaking strikes fear in the hearts of many people, many adults. You say speak in front of the public, man, and they almost a faint right in front of you. You say they just get nervous, they can't speak, their mouth gets all dry, they get nervous and lose their thought process. Math and science have that effect on our children for the wrong reasons. And I think if we introduce better ways to teach them, to engage them, to make it interesting and fun, I think they'll want to do it without it being something like bad medicine that you don't want to take. I think they'll engage it and go forward. So we must find different ways to teach our children the process of being more engaged with science. So you bring up a valid point, and I I don't know of any other way to teach them than to just make it fun. So yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay, well, thank you.
We have reached the halfway point here on the Kitchings Table for this Tuesday morning. I'm your host, W.R. Kitchings. Along with me is my co host, Ron Lee Kennedy. Our topic today is environmental racism in the air and the water. Racism in the air and the water. And what we're talking about today is two different things. One is first, what we covered in the first half of our show today was environmental pollution. But now we're going to talk about a different type of racism that has to do with the environment. And you may say, well, how can you be a racist with the environment? How does that work? Okay, that's why you are here on the Kitchings Table, because you'll learn, like everyone else will learn if you're paying attention, what environmental racism is. And this is nothing new. This is something that has been, you know, on the table for a while, but it's starting to gain a little bit more traction here in the 21st century. So I wanted to make sure we define the first two racisms we're familiar with, and that is just racism and then institutional racism before we get to environmental racism, because they all have one word in common, and that's racism. And racism is defined as the prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a uh, racial or ethnic group, typically minorities or marginalized groups. So prejudice, discrimination, and antagonism. So you're going to be prejudiced against me, you're going to discriminate against me, then you're going to antagonize me to show your dislike for who I am, because that I am a person that looks different. That's all you can go by. You can only go by what you see. You can't go by what I think, because you don't know my thoughts without me speaking on them. You don't know how I feel. You don't know what I feel until I share that with you. So the only thing racism can go by, for the most part, physically, outwardly, is the color of my skin. Then there's institutional racism, and that is discrimination or unequal treatment on the basis of membership in a particular ethnic group, arising from systems, structures, or expectations. Okay, so we have prejudice, discrimination, antagonism, and then we have system, structures, and expectations. Six things that all have to do with racism. Now we get to the new racism, and this has been on the board right alongside racism when we talk about social racism, and that's environmental racism. For some, it may be called environmental, others, it may be called ecological racism or ecological apartheid. Can you imagine that? Ecological apartheid. And we were not familiar with that word apartheid until it was really raised as to what was going on in South Africa. You know, apartheid became a buzzword because it was going on in South Africa. And it's like, apartheid? What the heck is that? Well, it's just almost similar to what's going on over here: racism, slavery, whatever you want to call it. And environmental racism is a form of institutional racism, but it has to do with leading to landfills, incinerators, hazardous waste disposal being disproportionately placed in communities of color. Disproportionately placed. So if you put 10% over here in this community, but you put 50% over in a community of color, then that's disproportionate. And again, it is a fact of unequal treatment. So you want to get us with, first and foremost, because we look different than you, we're going to be, singled out. Let's not even talk about economical racism, which is another racism, because everything stems from that piece. economics. When the money is imbalanced, and we already read to you that when the money is imbalanced, things don't go the same way. So, Ronline, if you're making $250,000 for a family of four on your job, and I'm making 50,000 for a family of four on my job, I can't do what you do in your neighborhood. I can't live where you live. I can't have multiple transportation opportunities. I can't, my environment is not going to be as safe as yours because you probably live in a community where there are probably 20, 40, 50 people who make that kind of salary, unlike what I live in the community that's barely making 50 and less. So when we talk about these environmental things that place disproportionate amounts of toxicity in communities of poor people, i.e., Black people or other people of color, then this is what this problem is. And it's been on the table since the 70s and 80s. And two champions of this fight have been uh, Dr. Ben Chavis, former director, I believe, of the Urban League or the NAACP, and Dr. Robert Bullard, who is a professor, I believe, at Texas Southern University. And Dr. Bullard pointed out that institutional racism stemming from government and corporate policies that led to environmental racism. Let me say that again. Institutional racism stemming from government and corporate policies that led to environmental racism. So, whereas the government can help us on one end, it can definitely hinder us on another end. And he says that these racist practices, including redlining, zoning, colorblind adaptation of planning, and now we talk about the fact that you brought this up, Ronline, the redistricting of maps so that the vote can go a specific way, not a balanced or true way. It's like there are so many things that are going on that it just perplexes you. And Dr. Bullard also said this, that any policy, practice, or directive that differentially affects or disadvantages individual groups or community based on color is environmental racism. And like I said, Dr. Ben Chavis, who was the former director of the United Christ of Church Commission for Racial Justice, in a speech talking about waste in Warren County, North Carolina. And for you viewers and listeners who are up in the North Carolina area, I'm sure you're familiar with what he was doing in Warren County and how, again, you're bringing toxic chemicals and waste into our communities. And while we're asleep at night, trains are moving, trucks are moving. And when we wake up, we don't know what's been put in our communities until something happens. So all these things roll up into one have created this environmental racism. And why do we have this? As cited in something that came from the internet, Wikipedia specifically, there are four factors which led to environmental racism: lack of affordable land, lack of affordable land, lack of political power. So this is why we have these crazy maps for redistricting so that the power can't be balanced. Lack of mobility, which means you can't move from one place to the other. I can't move from this toxic area to a clean area because I can't afford it. And finally, last but not least, poverty. Cheap land is sought by corporations and government bodies. As a result, communities which cannot effectively resist these corporations and governmental bodies and cannot access political power cannot negotiate just costs. So when we spoke a few weeks ago, a few months ago, about the farmers in America and how in North Carolina, between North Carolina and Tennessee, car company is buying up their farms to build plants to make these electric batteries and basically taking and stealing the land. Again, we get pushed out, run over all the time. So the environmental racism, and I would consider that part of environmental racism when you have black farmers who have land, but you want to run a highway from the plant that makes electrical batteries to the plant that builds the cars. You want to run it through the black farmer's land as opposed to running it. Well, why don't you go 5 miles north and then go uh, west to get to your plant, as opposed to running it through where black farmers live? You want to diminish that property so that they'll sell it. You can buy it cheaper and build something on it and keep things moving. Um, Reverend Chavis defined environmental racism in 5 categories: uh, racial discrimination, policies of environmental policies, discriminatory enforcement of regulations and laws, deliberate targeting of minority communities as hazardous waste dumping sites, and official sanctioning of dangerous pollutants in minority communities, and exclusion of people of color from environmental leadership positions.
Mm.
All these things, all these things are factors. And we bring these to you today on the Kitchings Table so you'll know what is going on. It's not just about the political landscape that is happening in Washington, D.C. This environmental racism is about property, land, and where they can store toxic waste, where they can make things toxicity in our communities. We can't leave a community. We don't have the mobility. We don't have the political clout. We can't purchase affordable land because folks are causing it to be dirt cheap. So we're losing on all aspects. And we wanted to bring this environmental racism to you today so you'll know that as you either hear about it or don't hear about it, read about it or don't read about it, however you get your news, this is what's going on. And there's more information that we would like to share with you about this. But I think Dr. Bullard, who is one of the point persons of this movement to bring this to the forefront, had this quote. He said, if we are so timid, shy, and somehow threatened by the Supreme Court coming in and throwing out everything, we will still be picking cotton in 2023. If we were scared of the Supreme Court, what they're going to say and do. We have to push back against these policies that are destroying our communities. If there are lawsuits that will come to our efforts to destroy racism, let it be. They should not cover us into fighting. I'm sorry, they should not cower us into fighting for our basic rights. That's what his quote says. So the fight is on. We must continue to get, as the great Congressman John Lewis said, fight the good fight, get into some good trouble. I don't think your parents probably told you, don't get in any trouble. They never distinguish it between bad trouble or good trouble. I mean, Congressman Lewis said, get into some good trouble because that's going to get you some good results. Bad trouble, you're going to go to jail or prison. Good trouble, it's going to be a fight. So that's where we are on this topic today. And I'm going to leave it right there before I get to the close, because our close today is definitely something that I wanted to bring to us because it's happening now. So before we get to the close, Ronley, anything you want to share about what I've brought to everyone about this environmental racism, a new racism?
Yes, well, as you say, this racism has been going on quite some time. Um, is I thank God for everyone who has gone through the college doors, really taking their education seriously, and those activists that's been out there on the front lines trying to get things done. Because you're right, where our jobs are concerned, these people that are in these factories today, being exposed to the raw material, getting it to the finished product, and the things that they've been exposed to over time. So I think about the coal miners, I think about how we've been getting, the heating, our electricity, all of those things that those people have been exposed to over time. filling up the hospitals and things like that. Um, Cancer treatment centers, just with they got movements going on now for our military bases, that's been contaminating, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
people's children over time, you
Camp
know,
Lejeune.
yes, and our hair products and
Yep.
lotions and things like that. So when I think about those people that's been affected and that has given their life basically, when you talked about some of that was dealing with secondhand smoke, that's been on the chopping block for quite some time, just running in the path of smoke. So it's like you have to be careful of the leaders that's blowing smoke all around you, you know and what are they doing about it? I remember when I was, you were asking me about when I was laughing earlier. You know, I thought at the age of 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 that I was dying, just going through this part of the north side, as if you will, going through the gateway area where they have a chemical plant over there. I was
Paint plant. They make paint over there.
They make paint. Okay. And so I was thinking, just based on that I was dying. It was like that smell. It was, and I couldn't separate it. So finally, I said something to my parents or whatever. They took me to the doctor, assured me that I wasn't dying because I was thinking I was going to die within like 5 days, 5 to 7
That's
days,
right. That's right. That
something like that. And so, with that, and not knowing over time, people did die, asthma, pneumonia, all of those things that were producing into our air quality, through transportation, all of that, our and like you say, on our playgrounds, through the soil, people having their own gardens, not knowing what's in the soil. So I can go, I have a whole list that I can go through, Earl, but the time won't allow it. So I'll turn it over to you.
well, thank you very much. So before we close today, I wanted to bring this sports historical fact to everyone because it is happening now. It is happening now. So today, for the first time in the modern era of the sport of tennis and the U.S. Open Tennis Championship, four, four Black Americans have reached the quarterfinals.
Or,
Like bruh man from the fifth floor. Four,
or,
four have reached the quarterfinals going into championship week. First time ever in the history of the U.S. Open in the modern era. And the modern era is considered like 68 till now. Uh, while we are familiar with the Williams sisters, Serena and Venus, who carried this torch for many years and they carried it on their own four shoulders, a new young group of players are on the rise. But before I do that, I must give honor to the first black tennis star, the first black tennis star, Miss Althea Gibson. She became the first African American to win a Grand Slam title. Then she won the what used to be called the U.S. Nationals, which was the predecessor to what we now have as the U.S. Open. And she did this in the 50s, in the 50s, where the technology was not like it is today with these rackets. She was also voted Female Athlete of the Year. So Althea Gibson won the U.S. Open in 56 and 57. So the four Black Americans going forward, and they're two men and two women. They are Madison Keys, Coco Gauff, Francis Tiafoe, and Ben Shelton. And all four of them are under the age of 30. Coco Gauff being 19, Ben Shelton being 21, uh, Francis Tiafoe being 25, and Madison Keys being 28. Now, the first male, the only black male to win the U.S. Open ever was the great Arthur Ashe, 1968. Since then, the Williams sisters have won a total of 8 combined United States Open tennis championships. Serena has 6, Venus has 2. Sloane Stevens won it in 2017. And then they may not, she's not American, but like they say, if you got 1% of black blood in you, they consider you black. Naomi Osaka of Japan won it in 2018 and 2020. So the women have carried the torch for the U.S. Open championships as far as winning. Arthur Ashe still is in that group alone. So congratulations to these 4 young tennis stars of the future. Hopefully one of them can end up in the finals. And I say that because Tiafo and Shelton have to play each other, so one of them will be eliminated. But on the women's side, they're saying that Coco Gauff may be the one that gets to the championship round. So we'll see. That's going on now, but that piece of history is happening now. So I wanted to bring that to our viewers and listeners today, Ronaldine, before we close.
Well, thank you so much, Earl. And I tell you that our history, I couldn't be more proud of where we have come from, from such a long way. Thank you,
I,
Earl.
I wonder if them being tennis stars was something that slavery helped them be. You think slavery helped? I'm just being facetious. That was a shot at the governor of Florida.
Yes,
Anyway,
yes, yes.
anyway, anyway. That's going to do it for us today here on the Kitchings Table. We hope you've enjoyed our show today, environmental racism, racism in the air and the water as it affects our communities. Until next week here on the Kitchings Table at 10 o'clock every Tuesday morning, we ask you to join us, tell somebody about us. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. From my co-host, Ronaldine Kennedy, I'm W. Earl Kitchings. Until next time, as we always say, do something good for somebody else today. Take care, everybody. Have a good week.